So we're very fortunate today. 25 years ago, plus or minus about this time, I was working at Conoco and I was given a job called Director of Decision Analysis, and I knew nothing about it. David took me under his wing because he was with Conoco/DuPont at the time. And by chance, it was the first year of the Decision Analysis Affinity Group meeting. So I hadn't been in the job, but maybe it was sometime within the first year, and we went up to Indianapolis. And that's when I met all of these gentlemen here and about 20 others. Before we start, I would like anyone who was at the first DAAG, besides just me, to stand up. And the founders, obviously. Okay. Now, who has been to the first 5 years? Someone, any of you were at the first 5 years of DAAG, stand up. So we're here to hear how we got here, but this was an amazing little group, and I was very fortunate to get a job at the time when all of this started, and just like some of our slides, it's been like a march of penguins. So Jay keeps all of the DAAG. He's our historian, so Jay Anderson's our historian, and he sent me this list, and I thought it was a perfect slide. So for those of you who didn't see that movie, the penguins every year go across the tundra, and no matter where the DAAG has been, there's been a core group. We've never missed a year. It's ebbed and flowed, and you're going to hear all the wonderful stories from these gentlemen right now. So Tom is coming up. He's retired from Eli Lilly. John Palmer is retired from General Motors, and David Skinner is not retired, so I've got him all walking up here. And I'm going to just turn it over to these gentlemen, and they're going to tell us how we got to be here.
Well, good morning, everybody, and I apologize in advance for obstructing your view of the Rockies. It's a pretty spectacular view out there. You know, my last DAAG was at 2002, I believe, in Las Vegas. And things have changed so much. I look at the program now, many of the things, I don't even know what they mean. So I have a lot to learn. I'm looking forward to it. I'm retired from Eli Lilly and Company, and Lilly used to have a chief scientific officer named Leigh Thompson. Leigh was an unusual guy, interested in a lot of things, but he went and took some training in decision analysis and decided to bring it into Lilly. Jay Anderson was the first to try it because Jay, at least so far, is a lifelong Bayesian. Jay had some successes. The group grew a little bit, and I joined in '91, I believe. We had trouble figuring out how to get new clients. So I thought maybe we should ask people outside, but I didn't know whom to ask outside because I didn't know anybody. I tried to go to Orsa Timms, you remember that, now called Informs, I believe. Didn't meet anybody in particular useful there, to my purposes. I even went so far one time as to go to the library and look in some detail at the decision analysis literature just to try to find somebody, some author who was listed as a practitioner within a company. Because all the practitioners I could find were practicing in decision analysis consulting companies. Well, that's not who we were. That's not what I wanted. But at least for a time, I was sort of up on the DA literature. I hadn't read the papers, but I had read the authors pretty carefully. We started calling people in about '93 to ask them how they sell themselves, how they get new customers within the organization, et cetera. And I found that everybody else was in about the same boat that we were. They were struggling with the same problem. I floated the idea of a meeting with them. And I'd say the reception was positive but very lukewarm. And in fact, Fred Crum from DuPont told me, I recall, that that customers of Kenny Oppenheimer had tried that about 5 years before, and the effort had not survived. So as we talked to these people, I began floating the idea of a conference. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is my experience with Orsa Timms sort of left a bad taste in my mouth in that I felt people, the academics and the people who were there as consultants were not actually practicing the kind of decision analysis that we were interested in. So I called people and we talked about having a meeting, and finally one day in 1994, those of us at Lilly said, we've talked about it enough, we're just going to do it in 1995. And if nobody's interested, well, I guess nobody will come. Well, word of the meeting got out, and I started getting calls from consultants and academic decision analysts. And I had to it sort of caught me by surprise, and I had to make a snap judgment, and I asked them not to come because, one, I hadn't been particularly impressed with what I saw at Orsa Timms, and two, I didn't want our meeting to become a marketplace for consultants. And sure enough, I know it didn't when I was going all the time. Well, so people agreed to come to a meeting May 15th and 16th, 1995 in Indianapolis. I had a colleague, Bob Whiteside, who was working on the arrangements. Bob was a big fan of the Indianapolis 500 race. So he set it up in such a way that if you come a day early, if you come on Sunday instead of Monday, or if you come for Sunday instead of Monday, you would get an escorted tour of qualifying day at the Indianapolis 500, escorted, of course, by Bob. So I think some people did that. One of the bad thing we did, and thank goodness for professionals now who set up our meetings, et cetera, the first day of our conference, Monday, was the day after Mother's Day. So that might have cost us a few attendees. We were very mindful of people's budgets. We arranged a block of 10 cut-rate hotel rooms at the Hyatt Hotel in downtown Indianapolis, which was fortunately just a short walk from where our conference was, and especially on a nice spring day, it would be nice. But after we started getting responses, we had to call the Hyatt and up that number to 20, and a few days later, we upped it to 40. So everybody arrived, and we had the meeting. Everybody who attended was invited to give a presentation on a topic of their choice. Now, I use the word invited euphemistically. They were implored. They were begged and pleaded with. And in fact, people did come through. Those of us at Lilly had 4 presentations ready to give in case nobody else had anything. But fortunately, we only had to give one of them. And that was Jay who did that. I think the presentations were well received. That's where I first met Ellen. She had just started in the job, and she gave a presentation that just knocked everybody's socks off. So I noticed as the conference went on that you would occasionally hear people say things like, next year, or first annual. And I thought maybe there's some market for this, if you will. So at the end of the conference, we had a planning session for the following year if we wanted to have one. And yes, it was unanimous. People wanted to have it again. Oh, I forgot to mention the attendance. We had 36 people at the first conference from 21 companies. So we agreed to have a second conference in 1996 that was in Houston, hosted by Texaco. There, at that meeting, the attendance went up to 48 from 36. And then in 1997, our third meeting was at Monsanto in St. Louis. And there it went up to 73. So we doubled in those first 2 years, the first 3 meetings. It was at the Monsanto meeting where, for the first time, an academic came and gave a paper. Somebody scheduled a session on real options, and Jim Smith came from Duke because he's an undisputed expert in that. Also, we were some of the peoples in the DAAG administration, if you will, the elders, one person called it, were beginning to leave their companies and become consultants themselves. So we had to reconsider our rules on academics and consultants. And by the year 2000, I believe the doors were open to all. I remember Bob Clemon was there for his second time, as was Jim Felly. Ralph Keeney had given a paper. So we doubled in attendance between 95 and 97. Critical thinkers know that as a people, we're not very critical thinkers. We fall for all sorts of stuff. At the same time, we are all huge repositories of data. Check the weather forecast, the stock market, check to see if the Yankees won last night. Not the Cardinals, they don't matter. But once in a while, it becomes advantageous or necessary to intervene in the flow of events and make a decision. And that's when we need to do a good job of using all our information so that we can make the best decisions possible, something that humans don't do naturally. I'm gratified to see efforts underway from what I've seen yesterday to try to improve decision-making among our populace, and I hope the DA community will continue that. Thank you.
Well, I'm John Palmer, and what I like to say is what we want to do is make decision quality a habit. And I'll give some of the things that I've done and some of the history of what GM was doing, and I'll cover why I think that's so important. First thing I wanted to do was some nostalgia. I don't know how many people attended the Ron Howard course where we got our probability wheels. And one of the big things of DA back in the beginning was to start doing uncertainty. So this was a tool that he gave out. It even has the strategic decision group John Palmer on it because he gave it to everybody who attended his class. And you can adjust the percentage that it shows, and then you ask them, you want to bet on the blue or orange, and then you spin it, and it's supposed to give a picture so people can come up with a better estimate of what the probability is. And that might be second nature to everybody now, probably not most of your clients, but this was really new even to the decision analysis practitioners. So I just thought I'd share that, and I don't know how many people have one. Whoa, it's more than I thought. That's great. How many people use it, and be honest? Hey, one honest. I can probably skip this. The main purpose of this slide was to give Tom Spradlin credit for taking the initiative of starting it, and he did a great job covering what he did. So I'll go to the next one. In 1999, which was the fifth DAAG, it was one that GM and AT&T co-sponsored. And you'll notice what I'm covering here is not what we covered at the conference, but where we had it. We had it at Disney World, at the Epcot Center, and we actually were in the GM Pavilion. We had a private tour of the racetrack where we were able to drive it around as many times as we wanted, and then we went and got special seating to see the fireworks. We also covered some DA stuff, but I don't remember what that was. What was happening at GM, the mainstream decision analysis, is that GM has to do everything their way, so they customized it, and they called it the Dialogue Decision Process, or DDP. And the emphasis was on dialogue. The main thing is for people to try to get a shared understanding of the events. So what they did, and products, that's why the vehicle's up there, was the focus of that. What should a DeVille be when it grows up, or a Camaro? And what they used was a multifunctional team, engineering, marketing, manufacturing, etc. And Tornadoes was the new tool. It was the first time Tornadoes were used, and they actually were used at the review board meetings where they talked about it. My experience at GM is we also were mainly outside consultant. SDG made a ton of money off of us. They didn't trust GM employees to do it, at least at first. So at GM, I was the first GM employee that led a bubble up. And a bubble up is what should a vehicle be when it grows up. And I did that on the Cadillac DeVille. But most of my work had to do with component divisions. And we probably did total business strategies. And there we did more than the bubble ups were primarily product, total business strategies with the target customers, engineering, marketing, price, etc. And then the other thing I did is I was assigned to be the DA leader to a powertrain division, and there I tried to get the people to actually run their own decision analysis. So I went from outside consultant to inside consultant to actual manager. I came up with a template where I could put together, and I called somebody on the phone. Half hour later, I sent them the template, had all the decision quality elements in it, creative varied alternatives, uncertainties, etc. And we actually had them go through it, and I was their consultant, but they led it themselves. And that's where I meant to make decision quality a habit. It is really teachable and doable for everybody to do it. The power steering pump was my first major business strategy where I worked for the general manager of the division. And there's a picture of a steering pump. And after it was done, everybody, not everybody, but many in the company said that it was a total failure. And I said, why do you think it was a total failure? Because we came up with a set of recommendations that they were supposed to implement over the next couple of years, and they didn't implement them all. So they said, your process stinks. So I went and talked to the general manager and says, was it a failure? What do you think about it? He says it was the best success he's ever had. He said the reason that the decision changed is because the organization now had a better understanding of how the business worked, a shared understanding, that's what that thing's supposed to represent. And the reason the decisions were different is because the world changed. You are on a different part of the tornado diagram, and therefore it picked different decisions to be made. So when people start criticizing you don't implement everything you decided in 2019 and 2021, ask them if the world's any different, and you could get a good answer for why it didn't change. And when should DA be used? I argue it should be used for all decisions, both business and personal. The same steps can be used for them. What you want to do is get a quality decision, whether it's for yourself or for your company. And you want to make quality decisions a habit. The difference is you start using less. If you decide where to go to lunch, you make that decision in 30 seconds. If you decide what the future DeVille should be, it'd take a lot longer. I would argue that all decisions are made the same way. And what DA does is provides a process to make sure it's a quality decision. Everybody makes the decision, look at quality, cost, and speed at some dimensions. And I have found over time that the quality pieces are more important than the cost pieces, because most of the estimates on cost are flaky. That's why you have such large bands. And the quality gives another way of looking at it. And what you do is you want to come up with creative, varied alternatives, put them in a matrix with the quality or your evaluation criteria at the top, put the numbers in the middle, and make a decision and make sure you include uncertainty. And I believe that that's how every decision is made, and what you want to do is make each one a quality. So which personal decisions can you make? Whether you want to buy a house, whether you want to lease or buy a car, whether you want to get married, there's where the quality part comes in, because it's a terrible on cost. Where to go on vacation. I mean, you and your spouse could sit down and talk about what you think is important, and that would have a huge impact on whether you're compatible and what could work long term. So you don't want to do a net present value on every decision, but you want to have your evaluation criteria and analyzing the uncertainty around it. In summary, you found this, that I think DA is great, but I'm preaching to the choir. DA helped me make many decisions throughout my entire life, and I'm proud to be a small part of expanding DA in the world.
This is a little nostalgia also. I had to bring my own piece of nostalgia, right? Oh, yeah. So this was from 99 when we did it at Orlando. And I think that was kind of one of maybe the turning point for DAAG in kind of growing. Early, before that, we did have a bit of effort. What was the word you used, Tom? You kind of getting people to sort of step up to the plate. We had to twist a few arms at the end of the day. Yeah, coerce them. Yeah, that was kind of it. So I'm not retired. Actually, I'm doing more now than I probably have ever done, which is actually a lot of fun. I'm not going to bore you with, you can read everything up there. This I thought was kind of fun. So when they asked me, they said, have you got any pictures? I'm like, yeah, I've got all kinds of stuff from all the DAAGs. If you saw the March of the Penguins, one of the things you'll notice is that either myself or DSI, we kind of ran probably, a dozen of them, something like that over the years. And it was usually people just didn't have time to do all the administrative stuff. So whoever Hilda is, you should definitely give her a big hand because it is a lot of work to put these things on. A lot of work. Yeah. So anyway, they said, do you have any old pictures? I'm like, yeah, I know I do. Let me go see if I can find them. So I actually found an old computer that had these pictures from 2006, I think it was. The problem was it was on an old computer. I couldn't get the pictures off of it because the USB port was so old. I had to go dig through my desk to find a USB 1 so I could download the pictures onto it, and then I had to take it to another computer, and then finally to my current computer to actually get it to where I could stick it up here. But anyway, so you'll probably recognize some of the faces in the crowd of people that were there back then, especially our good buddy Jay Anderson. So I'll tell you a little bit about kind of what I'm doing now and been doing for probably the last 5 or 10 years, which leads into sort of I think probably my last slide, which is where do I see DAAG in the next 25 years? As many of you may know, I sold decision strategies to the employees, left and went and did a lot of other things, still doing a lot of other things, but you get to the point where it's like you've kind of done all that you think you can do or want to do with large corporations. Can DA be used to make the world a better place? And that was really kind of where I was at in sort of 2010. Can we use this to improve people's lives? So I've kind of gone on two paths. One, which is I only want to work on big ideas, big projects that will really change the world. And the other is, can I do micro projects that will change the world? And so the first company that I helped kind of launch, we did with Michael Dell, and it was a water reclamation company. The next one that I'm working on right now is actually an industrial solar company, and you may say, oh, well, solar, that kind of makes sense. It's green, change the world. But the things that we're doing are actually impacting distributed battery storage, electric vehicles, and a bunch of other interesting things that I think do hold promise to really change the world and make an improvement for everybody's lives. Part of that kind of change in my life was I have a daughter who is now 15 and a half. The half is important if you have kids that are getting ready to drive. So safe electric vehicles is kind of an important thing, and actually improving the planet is kind of an important thing, I think. I still teach at Rice. I've been teaching there for 15 years now. And I've seen really a change in both kind of how people view decision analysis and kind of its acceptance, right? And everything kind of goes in a cycle. I mean, if you look at Six Sigma, it kind of ebbs and flows. We've had discussions over the years around how do we make this more sticky, right? How do we make sure people really use this and continue on? How do you sell the executives more? And one of the organizations that you may or may not know is the Society of Value Engineers. Anybody know them or belong to them? Any of them? Yeah, they've done a great job because they actually managed to get their process mandated for all government projects. So a mandate is a great way to get yourself permanently involved. But anyway, kind of enough of that. So the big things are kind of like, how do we save the planet? The small things are, how do we think about this differently, right? We're all here talking about how do you bring this into big companies, big decisions, right? What about the small decisions, the micro decisions, the things you make every day 100 times? Anybody think about that? Yeah? So I had this kind of interesting thought experiment about 5 years ago. Could you actually make DA something that you use every day and you don't even know it? What do you think? Interesting idea? What if you could use decision analysis to create food, to make recipes? So I thought about, what if I built a restaurant and it was built on decision analysis principles? What if we used DA and used it as the way that we create all the recipes for this restaurant? Where would it go? Kind of weird, right? Weird thought. Micro decisions. Why would I pick food? Why do you think? Anybody? Everybody eats, right? Everybody eats. How many people in here cook? Raise their hands. Yeah. When you cook, what do you do? What are you doing? You're taking ingredients, you're putting them together, and you're trying to come up with something good, right? What are we doing with decision analysis? We're taking options, we're putting them together, we're trying to come up with the best strategy for that company. Same thing, right? Same thing. The difference is, if you have a bad recipe, when do you know it? Immediately, right? So my thought was, could I teach people DA and teach them to cook at the same time? Which was a really interesting experiment. So last month, we were actually named one of the best restaurants in the world, which was pretty phenomenal. We have now sold all of our reservations for the rest of this year. You can't get in. It's been a pretty phenomenal kind of approach. And then, so I started thinking about a year ago, could I go the other way, right? So we use DA to think about, how do we create recipes? Could I use that and go back the other way and teach people how to be better decision makers, decision analysts through food? So we're going to be doing a course next year at Rice called Can You Taste a Strategy? Or we go the other way. Now, why does any of that matter? Well, here's actually the slides I was going to bring. But Tom and John have covered a lot of it, other than I will throw in one little note. So Tom was saying, he didn't get what he was looking for at Orsa Timms. I was telling him last night, we were at the same Orsa Timms meeting, and we had just sat through about an hour presentation on the most boring, trivial thing you could ever imagine. And we said to each other, that will never make its way into, corporate world because it's not practical and nobody cares about it. We should come up with something that actually focuses on the practical aspect of decision making. And here we are today. So, the one thing I guess I would say in terms of sort of the pitfalls that we had early on, I think we've kind of covered everything else other than, as John started to allude to, the reason that we decided we were going to accept consultants was because I left Conoco and started a consulting company. And so I sort of had to grandfather me in. Anyway. But the pitfalls were really that it was all volunteer, and so continuity was a difficult thing, especially early on. We were always at the end of the day trying to figure out, well, who is going to do this next year, right? And so I'm glad to see that, I don't think that's an issue going forward. Yeah. So that's, I think, a big plus. Kind of talked a little about that. Big thing is, I think, to keep this relevant, it's got to stay practical, right? If you want theoretical, go to Informs. If you want practical, come to DAAG. That's kind of always been our mantra on this. I think just looking at how many people are here today, I don't think we have to worry about critical mass anymore. That was a concern we had early on. Can we find enough people that are interested in this that'd be willing to come year after year? I think we've answered that question. So I'll kind of end with this. Is DAAG's original purpose still valid? I think it is. I think that's pretty clear just looking at everybody in the room. I'm happy to say that I only recognize about a third of the faces out here, which is great, and they're all old. So there's a lot of young faces, so I think that's a really good thing. Have these changes made it really more valuable or less valuable? I think more valuable in the end. The more we can disseminate this way of thinking, I think the better. I've definitely been a convert for 30 plus years, so whatever we can do to do that. But where's DAAG going to be in another 25 years? Hopefully, you guys invite me back for the 50th. That would be nice. And I hope to be around another 25 years too. But I'll leave you with this thought. Show of hands, how many people in here have a liberal arts background? Good. Where I'd like to see DAAG in the next 25 years is to be able to have people put up their hands and their soccer moms, their kids. We've expanded it beyond just decision professionals, right? Because I think if we're going to make it something that is in everybody's everyday life, you got to get past this sort of like the poll that was put up originally. People think this is all PhDs. If that's the case, that's where it will stay. If you want to change the world, you got to get it to everybody. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah. You're supposed to give him songs. Are you going to hand it to him?
I function pretty slowly.
Yeah. I don't know what you're going to do with it, but look at it. Thank you very, very much.
Very proud of it.
Good.
Who's the photographer? Oh, back there. There you are.
Okay.
This one's John's.
John? There you go.
Thank you.
David? And this is David's. We would not have this conference for the next 25 years without you guys. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
All righty. Good. All right. So we did want to ask if you have any questions or any comments for these guys. What's inspired them? What kept them going? What kind of things they had to work through in their implementations that you have any questions about?
Before we go there, so not everybody will get a chance to speak because we're doing some time management here as well. So you're more than welcome to go to the link and also submit your thoughts, and it'll show up on the screen. And John and I will run around with the mic.
For all three of you, thinking back 25 years, what would you have forecast for the future of DAAG 25 years looking forward, from the beginning? What was your expectation then?
Well, as I mentioned, one of the big surprises to me was how this organization has expanded to encompass things other than decision analysis, because that's all we were thinking of at the beginning. In fact, that's its name, DAAG, Decision Analysis Affinity Group. So the opening up to artificial intelligence, to big data, et cetera, I think is a surprise to me, something I would not have forecast, but it's certainly welcome.
So going back to the first DAAG and even in the subsequent 25 years, what one industry other than your own has been where you found it to be most useful to make contacts?
I think over the years, oil and gas and pharma have definitely been the kind of, baseline for companies coming. We've had all kinds of different companies over the years. We've had a few that one of the things I started to mention, but forgot, was we did have one or two companies we had to disinvite over the years because they came just for market intelligence. They didn't participate at all. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't participate at all, but they took all these copious notes, and it was just like, they'd be hiding in the corner, And so we're like, you're not adding to the conversation, you're not part of DAAG, so we asked them to never come back. But I think over the years, we've had PPG, so lots of heavy manufacturing, but all different industries. But I think oil and gas and pharma is where it's really kind of stuck the most and been more universally accepted. So, but like I said, I'd love to see, food companies here next year and others. So.
Being from GM, there was not a lot of other people from those type of industries. And I have found out that most problems are the same across industries. And industries that think they're different just are because they're too self-centered. So I think any industry would work as long as you want to make a quality decision.
There's some questions coming in from the poll. What risks are present to the future success of DAAG? Another person asks, how do we get DA for everyone? And there's a comment saying you've made a significant contribution to humanity. Thank you for illuminating and leading the way.
Well, I think the biggest risk would be a major economic downturn where companies quit paying travel. I don't know how many individuals would come if they had a foot to bill themselves. So I think that is, and companies would actually need DA more on the big downturn, but most people won't look at it that way.
I guess I'd build on what John just said. DAAG should be so important that you're willing to spend your own personal funds to come to DAAG.
I think one risk is the occurrence of a significant decision catastrophe, if you will. about 2 years ago, I moved to Texas. I wanted to go back to my roots. And since I've been there, I've become something of a bridge bum. And bridge players appreciate at a very deep level that it's okay to make the correct play and have it not work. So why can't all people think of that? You know, and that's part of the education I would like to see, that you can make the correct decision and it just bad luck intervenes. It just doesn't turn out right. That's something that we need to teach people. Let's not connect any catastrophe that happens with and say that it was a bad decision that led to it.
Another one is, have you seen change in sharing or openness of DAAG attendees over the years, or have they always been willing to share?
Yeah, with the one exception that David pointed out, I think everybody has been wonderful at being able to make presentations, to talk about things with you over a drink. It's just been a very open environment, and I think it's been wonderful.
How can DAAG do good with decision analysis, decision quality in the city or the place where it is held? Any thoughts on that? I mean, I think this is probably more. The question is, I think someone is probably asking for the next rounds of DAAG. How could the DAAG conference do good in the city in which it is being held?
Why not have a session for high school kids or things like that? I've taught high school kids. Believe me, they need help in making good decisions. It is not taught. It's not taught. I mean, that's part of the reason that I went back and tried to think about how can you impact people from a micro decision standpoint, because those are things they make every day. If you think about how many micro decisions you make in a day, in your personal life, in your corporate life, you add all those up, it's a lot bigger than the big decisions that we talk about at DAAG. A lot bigger. So that's what I would do. Do something for a high school. Invite kids in. You know.
All right.
Any voices in the audience? There's another one, but I want to just give the audience a chance. Okay. As former DA promoters within your companies, what advice would you give to budding DA champions cracking the nut in their organizations?
All I can think of is to persevere. Persevere. If you have a success, don't be bashful about showing it to people.
Have the biggest nutcracker.
Alrighty, let's give these guys a great hand and thank them for coming.